Awesome, thank you. Good morning. It is Friday, November 3rd. This is a special meeting of the Darien Board of Education Communications Committee. Our next meeting is December 15th at 8 a.m. And I will turn it right over to you, Dr. Adley.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you. I think there's at least one person online that looks at it. Good morning, Robin. This is just a wee bit of an update on where we are from where we left off. So I'll just walk through the memorandum with you, if you don't mind. So the focus groups, we said that we would establish those, and there were to be 7. So 3 for parents at the various school grade levels, and 3 for staff, and then 1 for community. You're going to have to sort of give a wee bit of guidance and discussion around a community, but we put that in. CABE can do that. Patrice McCarthy has kindly, I have Patrice because the board has used Patrice in the past, and I think she does a good job at that type of task. So we have November, which is really all day. We would have workshops for parents during the day. We would have for afternoon some staff members. It'll take 2 days to be able to complete elementary school and one of the secondary schools after school. So basically, Patrice will be here most of the day for first day. In fact, all day for the first day, because we'll do an evening one also for parents. And then she's going to be here from basically 2 o'clock through 8 o'clock at night for the second day.
Great.
She's committed to doing those. The questions, focus group questions, we had, if you recall the last time, delineated a number of these around these types of discussions. At the last meeting, we refined some of these, and these were the edits that were made at the table at our last meeting. So if they more or less are good enough for the committee and to frame the discussion, that's fine. If you want to continue today to review them and any other edits, that's also okay. So that's the update on the focus groups per se. I don't know if you want to have any discussion about it. In terms of the community group, I haven't decided, Marge, I haven't decided what that would look like, but happy to listen to people as to what that might look like. But I'll pause there for the moment for focus groups.
Thank you. So just to confirm, Dr. Adley, there will be groups that will take place during the day, and then there will be some after work hours also, so we can accommodate a variety of schedules, or we can accommodate people.
Yes, for parents. Parents will have during the day, parents will have at night, and a community group at night.
Okay.
The teachers were all after school.
Okay. And community group, do we mean outside of parents?
Well, that's an open discussion. I thought we did.
Yep.
Okay. Sure, John.
So I'll, piggyback on that. I think maybe we could utilize our RTM committees, not saying committee members, but for outreach to the broader community in other government bodies, maybe, or other private groups like DCA or, and I'm not sure how many, what are you targeting for the parent groups in terms of size?
15, I think we
Is
said.
it 15? Okay. So, similar size, and I'm sure we can find a vast array of community members that would be interested in doing that. The men's club, you already have a relationship with. So, there's a lot of different pools to pick from or get guidance for.
Do you want to take a representative list of community organizations and issue an invitation and do it that way?
Yeah, or just reach out and say, listen, we're trying to have a focus group, and could, if you know of anybody that might be interested, could you have them reach out to us or something like that? Proactively, because
Agreed.
You want them to show interest.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe we do the men's group, the DCA, maybe come up with a list of, RTM education.
Yep.
Or just RTM in general. There might be folks who aren't staff specifically on the committees who have a point of view. But who aren't parents. I think they need to not be parents.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably enough direction. I
Yeah.
think I'll try and be as inclusive as possible. As I can
Okay.
be.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
And we're looking to understand how the community feels they're receiving or not receiving information from the district being non-parents. Is that what we're exploring?
Yeah, I mean, their constituents, their taxpayers are important that we have some different outreach, but outreach to
Right.
the community. I mean, tell the good word of what we're accomplishing in the school district.
Okay.
So that they're more than willing to support our budget.
And we could understand better what they'd like to hear more about and
Exactly.
how they'd like to be able to access that information. Okay, great. So we can help put a list together, Dr. Adley, to get that
Just in, oh, sorry.
pulled. Sorry, go ahead, Jill.
just in switching gears, just in terms of nomenclature, parent participations be selected by the principals in consultation with the PTOs, I think. Because if you're using a principal, they typically would go to the PTO chair.
I think that's fair. I think CDSP is meant to capture
Yeah.
that as
But I
the
think-
umbrella.
Just say that again, sorry.
Understood,
Which-
but it just for accuracy,
Or throw,
principals in consultation with the PTOs.
or slash, do CDSB slash PD.
I think you could say both. I think
Yeah,
it's
that's-
accurate to say both.
Principals don't typically have a relationship with that organization, which is why I'm
No, oh, right,
saying.
yes, that's fine, yes, of course.
Um,
Conceptually, that's the same.
And we're not gonna get surprised by them not wanting to participate this
I would
time.
hope not.
I wouldn't expect so. Just to clarify again, I think that was a particular situation, which I think they tried to make clear, but I don't think that we will have the same problem here.
Great.
So I don't, look, I think we need to say PTOs here. I think it's not clear. They were citing why it wasn't consistent with their mission. I think we are going for parent groups. And that we're going through the principals, which means clearly we're going to PTOs. CDSP, I have some questions about the last bit, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to this.
Honestly, if I had to write that again, I would say PTOs, that's what
Yes.
it's meant.
Fine.
And do we know when Kate will come back with the information on the focus groups?
Well, I would hope that we could have that done for the 15th, because that would be the next meeting.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
I mean, that should be fairly quick, I think, honestly. I don't think that's.
Yeah, the next meeting or two would be great.
Yeah, and then my follow-up question to that then is, let's say one of the things they want to do is see more information in places where we're not staffed to do so. Will that preclude you from putting that in the budget, or could you be able to, since if we're doing it December 15th, your budget's pretty much done by then, so
I-
we're looking at 2025 for this kind of implementation for this, or will we be able to do something in 2024?
So I think both things are probably can run concurrently. I'm not looking at this, Dennis, as getting something in time for a budget. I'm wherever this plays out, is the way it plays out. It certainly wouldn't. Everything would be coming back to here, right? Then you can discern as to where it goes and so on. I mean, simultaneously, the concept of communications I've been thinking about for this budget, right? So, but I'm not looking to squeeze something in if we find something out, unless for some reason it made sense to the board to do that or otherwise, but.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay, clear.
Good question.
And these as drafted focus group questions now include the follow-ups that I had sent in, correct? Okay, thank you.
We'd probably have to just modify those for the community group. just a little
Yes.
bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a little too
Use your discretion.
perfect. Thank you. Those will be long days for Patrice. We
Yeah.
should get her lots of coffee.
Among other things. Food.
Well, I appreciate her stepping up because it's a busy time for her too, like with all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
workshops and stuff.
right. No, that's
That's a
great.
good idea because she facilitates our
She does,
discussions
yeah.
too pretty well. So
Great choice. Thank you. Policies.
Well, we need to be, in all honesty, I just need a wee bit of help here as to how we proceed with it. So we had the policies that were presented the last time from different districts and so on, and we looked at a variety of policies. Julie did a nice job sort of going through the policies that the board had and sent us to us. Marge had a look at those too. So the questions on the table are really how you want to proceed with either, there's several questions. One, are we going down the direction of developing one communication policy, or are we looking at revise and update and modify current ones that we had, and kind of what are the tenets that we're actually potentially looking for? But I'll leave it to the chair to frame it further than that, or March.
So I think what we're hoping to do is have discussion at this table to the point where we can kind of package something to hand it off to policy and give them some direction on what we'd like to look at. And we want to be looking at sort of overall communications policy direction, but I know we also need to be considering an external social media policy, as well as the recent policy we've done on social media is really for internal usage. So what we pulled together for this meeting, and I understand you all got it yesterday, so I'm not expecting that everyone's read all of the DPS policies that you got yesterday. Were all of the policies that were kind of in line with the examples we've been looking at outside of district. And I just pulled those to try to give us a comparison and understand what we have right now and what we don't have. I've been through them all, and there are a couple things that I think we can even start discussing already. But so I think, as Dr. Adley just said, one of the big questions we'll have to decide, and I don't mean this morning, is do we want a focused communications policy like the Darien Public Schools communications policy, or do we want communications addressed where appropriate in a variety of policies, or a combination of both? Spoiler alert, I would think probably both is the right answer. I think there is some room to have a communications policy. I think we probably can tie what we're doing policy-wise to what we've written as our stated objective as a committee, just so we don't lose track of that, because it does make sense there. And then beyond that, if we could, as a committee, look through these policies and kind of look at what we think we're hitting and what we think we might be missing, and be prepared to have that conversation in our next meeting, I think that would be very helpful. I'll say some of the things, and I'm happy to share this little outline with you guys if it's useful. From looking at the outside district policies and bylaws, there are definitely a mix of bylaws and policies. I think people tend to use those terms interchangeably. I think we pretty much stick to policies. And then there are also practices described, and I think we'd want to tease out the difference there. I don't think we want to have too much practice defined in policy. There are discussions about how and when and where to engage the media. We don't necessarily cover that too much at the moment. Certainly discussions of privacy, student and staff, privacy, social media. There are different ranges of how specific or how simple these examples are. So we'll have to have some conversation there. And then there's also a variety of parent involvement programs defined. And we'll have to have some conversation about how programmatic we want to be. I think there's room for us to get more into the theoretical importance of parent involvement and make sure that's built into our policies appropriately. I'm not sure that we want to define a program in a policy, but we can discuss. And then kind of relatedly, different approaches. Some are a statement of purpose or intent, and some are a bit more, like I said, laying out details, discussing vehicles and frequency, very programmatic. So those are some of the ways that I was looking at these. I think we presently, as stated, have a variety of policies that touch on communications, touch on transparency, touch on privacy, touch on a lot of key points that we'll need to make sure we keep built in. And as you get the chance to look through the policies and the roles and responsibilities that were attached, look for holes, look for things that seem like they're doing the job or covering what needs to be covered. And then if I had to guess right now, I would say probably the meatiest place for us to work is in the 9110, 9220, 9250, which are role of board and members, official duties of chairperson, those, and they haven't been looked at since 2008. And I think that might be a good starting point to package something around those for policy to build in some more specific communications discussions. I just said a lot. I'll stop for a second and see if anyone has questions.
So, oh, did you want to say something, March? Sorry.
The policy committee meets next week, and I was going to move on to the 9000s
Okay.
and with Shipman's model policy. So do you want to discuss it here before I bring them forward? I guess that's
Maybe.
sorry. hold on.
Let's talk about that for a second and see what we think. Did you have something, John?
Well, okay, so that, what was I gonna say? I think your outline is perfect. I mean, I certainly haven't looked through anything. I'd love to see your outline and
Yes.
kind of direction. I think we should get direction from the board in terms of how they want this committee to handle it vis-a-vis policy. And, you know, in the past, we've talked about merging these two committees. Ultimately, I think we're seeing how some of this is complementary to one another. Now, hearing what Marge said in the 9,200 you said, now we're like kind of now stepping on toes. If not, that's the wrong term, but we're running kind of parallel here. So I think not knowing kind of where we're at and what you just called out help. I almost think like you got to figure out, the board needs to direct like who
So
should be doing the work at this.
What I would suggest to answer that is that what the communications committee probably needs to come up with is truly directional, not actual policy.
Yeah.
So let's take, for example, your spoiler alert and
Right.
say that we're interested in a high level policy, and then we're going to be asking for some specific. We don't necessarily have to decide what is bylaw, what is policy, what is procedure. We just have to provide the direction. So let's take some examples. Let's say we come up with, we want a communications policy that specifies ABC.
Yep.
We want to understand that policy covers X, Y, Z, where in the case of, for example, external social media, I think we should bat around specifically some of the components of external social media that need to go in there before we send direction, not a policy, but direction to policy. And then they can decide how it's organized, working with, Shipman and Goodwin in terms of what belongs where. So I think similarly, in terms of the 9,000, my suggestion would be that perhaps specifically because we are working in parallel, we listen to policy, but let's specify to policy. Communications also wants to take a look. They'll do usually they just do one set of work. Maybe we ask policy to do sort of a first read. We all listen to policy. We come back to communications and then send it back to the board after both committees have taken a look at it.
That
So-
sounds great.
It just means it doesn't go to the board quite as quickly, but it lets both organizations do their work in parallel. Otherwise, I think probably we're okay with just providing some direction. We want to see policy that covers.
Right.
And then I think, but when we say covers, I think we need to give some specific direction.
Right.
So I'll stop talking a second, but like if we take the policy work that we just went through, which was the material challenge, there is a policy and then there's some procedure that sits underneath that specifies the whole process. Again, we could have, pretending that's ours, we say, well, we think that the policy directionally needs to specify this is the philosophy you're using
Mhm.
to review, and then we can set out an outline of the process, and then that goes through the legal filter, and policy is something of a check and balance. So that would be my suggestion. I think it may, offline, we just may have to figure out like when does it come back up to the board versus down to policy and all of that. But I think philosophically, that's how I would handle it.
And so you're thinking that for policy next week, we should move ahead as Marge described and let policy take a look at those and see where
Yes,
including myself, obviously. So,
Yes. yes. And then all of us would be expected to listen to that meeting, understand what's in the policy.
right.
And then we can reflect on it from a communications perspective.
Okay.
And adding on that, it's not just the 9,200s, right? Because there's a lot of communications outside of that. So I want to
Yes.
call that out as well.
Yes.
Just going back to the external social media policy, that I think that, again, I'm not on policy, but I think as a communications group, I have a lot of confusion, what's internal, external. I mean, I've read this 4-5 times and I don't understand what's internal, external. And I think there's a lot of confusion still out there. And I think that should be cleaned up or
Mhm.
pursued
Mhm.
with the policy committee immediately. That's what I would recommend. I mean, there's kind of a hanging chad still on this external social media policy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think that what was discussed at our last board meeting was that this group should be giving direction to policy on what to do with that external social media. So I don't know that I'm 100% clear on that based on this conversation, what we would want to do with that. Do you have thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think it means that when we come up with our own internal audit, if you will, in terms of the policies that touch communication. So that might be, maybe that's our next step. Let's do sort of a policy audit and which ones we think communication touches. We're going to identify either a policy that needs to be touched or a policy that doesn't exist. In this case, probably it's both, because this policy is confusing.
Right.
And then I think we want to, again, come up with the parameters, send it back to policy. So this is why we think it's not working.
Okay.
And this is the work you need to do.
Okay. So that's what we're doing here now
Yes.
is the audit.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm
I
following.
must say, I'm a little uncomfortable though with committee dictating committee work.
committee.
Yes.
That's why I was saying we got to figure
Yeah,
out,
and
it
makes
probably has to
clunky.
pop up.
It makes it very clunky to have to go back to the board and come back.
Right.
But no, it's helpful. Yeah,
I
no.
think I'm really uncomfortable with
I
us
agree.
dictating another committee to do work.
So we
I
just
agree.
give a report to the board.
Yeah.
And then,
Yes.
that's the way the workflow
Right.
works.
And
Mhm.
and I agree with Jill. I think our direction needs to be directional. I'm certainly not suggesting we should provide policy with a draft or
Mhm.
Agreed.
or specifics on what should be in the policy. Like,
I mean, I'm good with just saying, guys, there's a hanging chad on this external. You guys go tackle it because that's what their role is.
Right.
Honestly.
I think probably the most efficient thing for this subcommittee to do is to come up with that audit, present it to the board with why on each policy, and let the board send it to policy, and then they can work it through.
And there's great synergy because you sit on both. So you can take the
Yeah.
thoughts from this committee to that committee. So
there you go.
honestly, it's
No,
awesome,
it's-
actually. It's very beneficial.
It's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. And for the purposes of our audit of these policies, I will share with you those notes that I just outlined. And then there's another piece too of, kind of on the broader level that what we want to look at is we want to look at ways to facilitate getting public input. We want to make sure that we're facilitating, informing the public as well. So putting information out, how to be responsive, how to be transparent, supporting two-way communication or recognizing the importance of two-way communication and protecting students, families, and staff as other points for us to consider as we look at all this. So,
Yeah, and I guess what I would also add is
Yeah.
finding a voice for the board. I mean, we just had an example most recently where the board had to send out a communication regarding the vacancy. And again, I think there's a bit of, I don't want to say struggle, that's too strong a word, but there wasn't a clear process or policy in place of how to share that news with the community. And we did it in different ways and was successful and we got the word out, but it wasn't clear cut how we would do that right off the bat.
and
So,
we could be
yes.
quicker if we
Yes.
had that set up.
Quicker, more direct as a board voice instead of working through other voices. I mean, again, I'm not being critical. It's just something, continuous improvement, best practices we could do.
I added that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
So you'll send this out with your kind of initial audit and then,
I'll send this out to you guys today
cool.
to review, to all of you. And
So the process, so the process to get us to that point will be,
so we're going to now, as a committee, work through all of the policies that we have and do, as Jill was calling it, an audit, I think is the right term, to see what we think what we have, what we think we're missing, and kind of come back at our next meeting in December and work through that literally and talk about, I think we have a little too much of this and not enough of that. And I think we're missing, a discussion on when to use skywriting altogether and that kind of a thing.
so at the next meeting, essentially there'll be an opportunity to do a wee bit of work on, this is what we thought, or
Yep.
Mhm.
And then after that meeting, you'll report back to the board at the
board.
next meeting and then the board will then direct it to policy.
To policy.
So in terms of maybe organizing it, administration probably can take their look, board members should take a look, send anything they think is missing or
To Julie and Marge.
to Julie and Marge.
Yep.
And then that way we have a working document to start with.
Yes,
Yeah.
a summarized
Okay.
working document would be great.
Which sounds like we already do.
do you need,
Go
do
ahead.
you need any guiding questions to frame this, or is everybody good with what the charge is? Just. Are we?
Yeah, I
think
think
we're
we're
good.
good.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
You don't have to do anything, Alan.
yeah,
Well, I just want to make sure we do.
yeah, no, I think we have what we need to do an effective job at this.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks
Great.
for asking.
awesome. Thanks. I knew that was going to be a tricky one, so thank you, everybody.
No,
I
it's
think we
good.
got to a good place.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Maybe we just want to give in the spirit of giving Marge and Alan enough time to just put something together. You need to
A
have
date.
your comments back within 3 weeks. So that gives you a week at least to.
So what date? Ish?
We'll give you a
December
date when we send this
Okay,
info
thanks.
out.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. All right, town hall meeting schedule.
So there was to be September, November, January, March, but clearly since we were working through the schedule, some of this stuff anyway, whether it's policy or communications plan and so on. I mean, it's all just going to help us moving forward because these things will be in place. It's not as if I think we're holding ourselves completely to every deadline for this year, but it's just sort of establishing for next year. As it turns out, there's a need for an opportunity for a town hall meeting. So that's the November one that I'm putting up. To suggest any other ones at this point, I don't think it's going to be helpful in the middle of everything that's going on. January 11th, I'm putting that date. That's typically where I would do a discussion with PTO members or otherwise. And we had said that, you know, board members would also be present. So that's a tentative date, but it's a typical date that sort of, I think, sort of works with the schedule and the budget calendar, so on. I haven't advertised these yet, but so if you want to take a look at the date, I'm actually looking at that date in March, and I don't know why that date is down at that date, because I'm nearly positive there's a conflict there.
On the 14th.
I'm just looking at that date again. I don't know why I think that's the wrong date, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because I have a funny feeling that resonates with me with conferences or something, I think.
But
Maybe
you're
I'm
targeting a March
Yes. Yeah,
general.
that's
Okay.
fine. I
don't
left it
really
to be
care about-
determined because honestly, I'm not quite sure what I would say at that point, but as we get closer, things come to the table and I think we'll
Right.
be able to frame it. But I'd like to know if the board wants to contribute towards that discussion. That's good too.
And can we just make it clear that these aren't official meetings? So board member involvement has to be limited to less than a quorum, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Well, if I call a meeting, even if the board doesn't call it a meeting, it has to be noticed.
Right.
So for instance, for this meeting, we'll have discussion with the board chair, but I'll just have to notice it as a town hall meeting, not a board meeting,
For the Oxford one, you mean next week?
but it has to be noticed.
Right.
But other than that, that's,
Right, but if we had 9 of us show up at
That's
that
okay.
meeting, is that okay, or is that a board meeting then?
it just has to be noticed.
Oh,
But
It has
that's
to be
when you have
noticed.
an agenda that you have to follow and you can't, my question is, do we have to have a special meeting or is it a notice meeting that you can then bring other items onto the board, onto the discussion? Because that's what I'm afraid of, is that you start to go in a different direction and your notice is for Oxford's transition planning for interim principal, and you go into something else and it's not warned as such, and now we're in violation.
Okay, so,
So I would notice it as a town hall meeting with the addition, in this case, for additional with discussion around the transition plan for the Oxford Elementary School. That's it. That's it, period. But there may be 1 or 2 other technical questions on the table at the moment as to.
so can 9 board members show up at that meeting and not
Yes.
be a board meeting?
Correct.
Okay,
Because we're not participating, correct? I mean, like, we were all at a library thing recently,
Right.
not officially not participating, and just because we were all in the same room, it didn't become.
I understand, but in this case, there might be a couple people participating in that, like you might have your
Okay.
officers participate, sitting up there with Alan to have a board voice.
Yeah.
So that's I guess,
Well, I'll get the clarification, but
Okay.
it's
You know what?
my understanding of it has to be, if I'm calling it, for
Yes.
instance, in this case, I sort of am, right? Or I am. It's not like the PTO calling it, inviting us to it. We have to just notice the meeting and the members can be there.
So that's a
I hear
distinction.
you. Would you mind just having Tom write up a little quick thing, just so then we all have it in
Sure.
reference?
Sure.
Because we'll want it, I think we can file it with, we decide whether we put it in policy or procedure or what have you.
That'd be very
um,
helpful.
That's very good.
Sure. And in addition to the presence, I think people are looking for clarification about participation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or whatever he says. right?
Yeah,
yes,
Um,
but we just don't want to be in violation of FOIA, having an illegal Board of Education meeting.
exactly.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm afraid of.
So we don't want to be in violation of FOIA, but also first and foremost, and I know that I'm not contradicting you. We want to make sure that this meeting truly serves the purpose of the public being heard and having a space to speak. In this case, it's the building of Oxbridge. So starting from there, how can we both be technically correct and still meet what is truly the purpose of the meeting?
Yes,
Yeah,
well,
that's
but
fine. Yeah.
So Alan, you mentioned that January meeting. Is that going to supplant your PTO meetings discussing the budget?
I think it
Or is it going to be complementary?
if it's for that purpose, I think it would supplant the thing.
Okay,
I just don't know the reason, like they're running around even more.
mhm.
that's perfectly, my concern was you're going to be doing the PTO meetings and this meeting. and it was, and plus all the other budget discussions, and it was going to be redundant. But if you're substituting your PTO meetings with this town hall, I think it's a great idea,
I
actually.
do too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that works.
Great.
I think that makes sense. Efficient.
That's perfect.
Terrific. And how will you advertise these, Alan?
How will we advertise it? It depends on what the audience is.
Mhm.
So for instance, the audience here for November 9th, we spent specifically to the Oxbridge school community. However, we also put it in the weekly update to any other, just noticing that it's happening so that people, if they so want to come about it, they can.
I think that's worthwhile. Just, you know, a big part of the idea behind these town halls is to create opportunities to engage with the district outside of this room, for
Yeah.
example, and, you know, off of Zoom. So whether people choose to attend or not outside of the Oxbridge community, I think it's nice for people to know it's happening.
Yes, of course.
That's
Yeah,
great.
it's timely, and I was really happy to see the Oxford come together. So thank you too.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, cool. Wow. Timeline?
It's just modified, adjusted, or revised. Just very little actually, below as you see.
And so as we talked about for our next meeting, we would expect or hope to have a report from the focus groups to talk through, ideally, and further discussion coming out of our audit of our policies. And then hopefully after that, we'll be going to the board with policy direction, and in January, we can prep any handoff that we need to. And I hope we'll be ready to start looking at a draft of our communications plan, kind of drafted and fleshed out a little bit by January. Anybody have any thoughts or questions?
So
on
just a
it?
technical question. I know you updated the board around our purpose of the communications committee. Did we ever have to vote on that as a board, or?
We informed the
Yeah,
board.
Yeah. I
We
know
didn't
did, yeah.
vote it
Okay.
on it.
But-
Excuse
And we
me.
got no pushback from the board.
We
either.
did
Okay,
not.
So I'm fine with that.
Okay, and I think, yeah, there's an A, B, and C to our purpose, and C probably, it just ties to our guiding documents, which makes all the sense in the world. So I'm not sure that that's a piece that goes into a policy necessarily, but just to call that out. But the A and the B are pretty broad, and I think directive general.
And where I think we end up voting is, you know, eventually a communications plan comes up, eventually
Yep.
a policy audit comes up, and then the whole board acts on the work and says, move forward or don't.
Yep,
Perfect.
sounds great.
Good question.
And with this
Um,
timeline, do you want to adjust the dates to be more, I mean, because we have revised policy spring 2023, so obviously we've gone through that. So do
Oh.
you want to put more accurate dates of when we're,
I think, did you mean spring 24, Ellen?
Yes, I did actually.
Thanks, Dennis. And yes,
you
you're
know,
right.
and you
March.
just mentioned communications plan January of 24, and we're saying fall 24, so I don't know if we want to do Q1.
Well, I think that's hoping that we'll have an approved communications plan by fall of 24. So. we'll
Oh,
be-
sorry. thinking-
Maybe we'll
That-
get
that
ahead
one's-
of
That
that.
one's on me. I'm
That's
thinking
okay.
backwards, Sorry.
No worries. And you were right, March 14th is evening,
so that is.
parent teacher conferences. All right,
Okay.
great.
So in terms of work planning, can we just check, Marge, it's okay, we were kind of dumping on you because you're ending up with those focus groups at the end of November and then hearing from us that following week, the 4th, for the policy audit. That's enough time for you to have both prepared for the 15th.
Again, if it has to slip too, it's perfectly okay. I mean, we got a lot of balls in the air coming.
Yes, I
Okay.
appreciate people's understanding
Yeah.
just of workflow at the moment
Oh.
and things that are coming up.
Especially what we're focus is right now.
All right,
Not
great. We're still moving. We're making it happen. All right, anyone have anything else? If not, we will move to public comment.
If anyone in public would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to dismiss. Dennis, John, all in favor? Thanks, everyone.